Have you ever caught someone staring directly into your eyes and felt like they could see straight through you, not just looking at you, but reading you, as if something ancient inside you had just been exposed, something you didn't even realize you were showing? That moment can feel unsettling, almost intrusive, because deep down, you sense something real is happening. Now let me ask you something. What if your eyes are not just windows to your soul? What if they are signals? What if they are constantly broadcasting something about you? Something deeper than personality, deeper than words, something archetypal. Carl Jung spent decades exploring what he called the collective unconscious, a shared layer of the human psyche, a field of ancient patterns, archetypes, that shape how we think, feel, choose, and live, often without us realizing it. But there's a lesser-known idea, one rarely discussed openly, an idea that suggests something bold, that your physical traits may reflect your psychological patterns, and more specifically, that your eye color may not be random, not just a genetic outcome, but a symbolic expression of the dominant archetype shaping your life. Think about that for a second, because if this is even partially true, it changes how you see yourself completely. Before we go further, I want you to do something simple. Look in the mirror, or remember your eye color right now, and drop it in the comments, blue, brown, green, hazel, whatever it is, because by the end of this journey, you may see it differently. And if you're drawn to understanding yourself on a deeper level, beyond surface personality, subscribe and stay with me, because what you're about to hear is not casual information. It's something you feel. Now let's go deeper. Have you ever noticed patterns? People with certain eye colors, often carrying similar energies, similar presence, similar ways of interacting with the world, not identical personalities, but similar essence. And have you ever experienced this? Looking into someone's eyes and instantly feeling something about them? Trust, distance, warmth, intensity, danger, familiarity, without a single word being spoken. That's not imagination. That's perception operating below consciousness. Jung believed that archetypes are not abstract ideas. They are living forces, patterns embedded deep in the human psyche, and these patterns express themselves through behavior, through emotion, through perception, and possibly through physical form. Ancient cultures understood this intuitively. The Egyptians believed the eyes were the seat of the soul. The Celts studied patterns in the iris. Shamans across cultures saw the eyes as a map of spirit. They didn't separate body and psyche the way modern thinking does. They saw them as one system, one expression. And here's where things become uncomfortable, because modern society has stripped meaning from many things that once carried it. We've been taught that physical traits are random, that they don't carry symbolic weight, that they mean nothing beyond biology. But what if that's incomplete? What if meaning was removed, not because it wasn't real, but because it couldn't be easily measured? Because if your eye color reflects something about your inner structure, then you are not as random as you've been told. You are patterned, designed, or at least aligned with something deeper. And here's the part that hits hardest. Most people are living in contradiction to that pattern. They ignore their natural tendencies. They force themselves into roles that don't fit. They chase lives that feel wrong. And then they ask, why does everything feel so heavy? Why do I feel disconnected? Why does nothing feel like it's mine? Maybe the question is not, what should I become? Maybe the question is, what am I already that I've been ignoring? Because if there is something in you, something consistent, something recurring, something that keeps showing up no matter how much you try to change it, that may not be a limitation. It may be a signal, a direction, a pattern trying to express itself. And if you've ever felt like you were meant for something, but couldn't quite define it, that's not fantasy, that's communication. Your deeper psyche trying to reach your conscious mind. And it doesn't speak in sentences. It speaks in patterns, in tendencies, in repeated feelings, in instincts. Jung called these archetypal imprints, structures that shape your life from underneath your awareness. And the idea we're exploring here is this: that your eye color may be one of the visible expressions of those imprints, a kind of symbolic fingerprint, a reflection of how your inner world is organized. Now pause for a second. Think about the people you felt drawn to. Think about the ones you felt cautious around. Think about the ones who felt familiar without explanation. Was there something in their eyes? Something you couldn't logically explain, but immediately recognized? That's not coincidence. That's pattern recognition. And the more you begin to notice this, the more you start seeing people differently, not just as personalities, but as expressions of deeper structures. And here's where everything starts to shift. Because if your eyes are expressing something real, then your life has direction, not a fixed destiny, but a natural alignment, a path that feels easier, not because it's simple, but because it's true to your structure. So here's the question I want you to sit with. What if the life you've been trying to build is not aligned with the pattern you carry? And if that question creates tension inside you? Good, because that's where awareness begins. And in the next part, we're going to break this down, eye color by eye color, archetype by archetype, so you can start recognizing not just yourself, but everyone around you. Make sure you're subscribed, because what comes next will change the way you look at people, literally and psychologically. Millions of people are walking through life completely disconnected from who they really are. They force themselves into careers that drain them, into relationships that don't fit, into identities that feel heavy, but familiar enough to keep going. And then they wonder, why am I so exhausted? Why does nothing feel aligned? Why do I feel like I'm living someone else's life? Here's the uncomfortable truth. It's not because you're lost. It's because you've been ignoring something that has been speaking to you since the day you were born. Your eyes, not as appearance, but as signal, as orientation, as a kind of inner compass you were never taught to read. You were trained to see your eye color as random, as cosmetic, as meaningless. But what if it isn't? What if it's closer to a map, a symbolic GPS pointing toward the way your psyche naturally moves? And if that's true, then ignoring it doesn't make you free. It makes you misaligned. So let's begin with the most misunderstood eye color in this entire system. Brown eyes. If you have brown eyes, there's a high chance you've been told something your whole life. That it's common. That it's nothing special. That is one of the most damaging misunderstandings there is, because within this symbolic framework, brown eyes carry one of the deepest archetypal roles. Through a Jungian lens, this aligns with what we can call the guardian, the ground, the one who stabilizes. Your role is not to shine the loudest, it's to hold the structure, to create safety, to provide something others don't even realize they depend on. You are the one people come to when things fall apart, the one who listens, the one who understands, the one who holds space when others cannot. And here's what makes this so powerful. You don't just understand people intellectually. You feel them. You sense what's underneath. You recognize emotional patterns without needing them explained. And because of that, people trust you, often without knowing why. Strangers open up to you. Friends rely on you. People feel safe around you. And that is not random. That is pattern. That is presence. That is something you carry. If this sounds like you, type ground in the comments, because this is something you need to recognize consciously. But there's also a shadow here, because every archetype carries one. Your strength in supporting others can become self-neglect. Your empathy can become exhaustion. Your stability can become emotional weight. You give and give and give until one day you realize you are empty and you don't know why. You're surrounded by people, but disconnected from yourself because you've been holding everyone else without holding your own center. And this is your lesson. Learning the difference between caring and losing yourself, between supporting and sacrificing your own growth. Because your role is not to disappear for others. It's to remain rooted, while still rising, to be grounded, without being stuck. And when you find that balance, something powerful happens. You become a bridge between stability and growth, between emotion and clarity, between chaos and structure. Now let's move to something very different. Blue eyes. If you have blue eyes, you've probably heard things like, "You're intense. Your gaze is piercing. People feel exposed when you look at them." And maybe that made you uncomfortable. Maybe you tried to soften it, hide it. But here's another way to understand it. Through a Jungian lens, this aligns with the archetype of the seer, the one who perceives, the one who sees through illusion. Your energy is not heavy. It's revealing. You don't just look at people. You notice things, subtle shifts, micro-expressions, inconsistencies. You pick up on what doesn't match. And that can feel uncomfortable for others, because most people are used to being seen only on the surface. You don't stay on the surface. You go deeper, instinctively. And this is where your strength lies. Pattern recognition, the ability to detect truth beneath appearance, to sense when something is off, to recognize when something is real and when it isn't. That's not imagination. That's perception. And if this resonates, type C in the comments, because your awareness is something you need to trust, not suppress. But again, there is a shadow, because seeing too much can isolate you. You notice things others ignore. You recognize patterns others don't want to see. And that can make you feel disconnected, like you don't fully belong, like you're always observing, but not always understood. You may struggle with trust, because once you see through illusions, it's hard to pretend they're real, and this can create distance between you and others, between you and simple connection. So your lesson is this: learning to see clearly, without disconnecting emotionally, learning to hold truth, without losing connection, because your role is not just to expose reality, it's to illuminate it, to help others see, without pushing them away. And when you balance that, you become powerful, someone who brings clarity, without creating distance. Now pause for a second, because what you're beginning to see is this. These patterns are not about labels. They're about recognition, about noticing what already exists in you. And in the next part, we're going even deeper, into the remaining I archetypes, and how all of this connects into one complete picture. So make sure you're subscribed, because what's coming next will start to bring everything together in a way you won't be able to unsee. There's something else about blue eyes that most people don't fully understand. It's not just that you see, it's how you see. You don't just notice what's in front of you. You notice what doesn't match. The gap between words and intention, between expression and emotion, between what is shown and what is hidden. You can feel when someone is lying. You can sense when something is off. You can read the silence behind what is being said. And that's not something you learned. That's something you carry. That's why your presence can feel intense to others. Because around you, masks become harder to maintain. People either feel safe enough to be real or uncomfortable enough to pull away. There's rarely a middle ground. And if you've experienced that, people either opening up to you instantly or becoming distant without explanation, type truth in the comments. Because that reaction is not random. It's a response to your energy. Your role, symbolically, is not just to see truth, it's to hold it. But here's the shadow, because seeing clearly can isolate you. You notice things others ignore. You understand dynamics others don't want to face. You see contradictions that others prefer to avoid. And over time, that can create distance. You may feel like you don't fully belong, like you're always observing, but not always included. And sometimes, you may struggle with trust. Because once you see through illusions, it's hard to pretend they're real. So your lesson is not to stop seeing, It's to use what you see differently, not as judgment, but as awareness, not to expose, but to guide, because your role is not to break illusions for the sake of being right. It's to help others reconnect with what is real at their own pace. And when you learn that balance, your perception becomes healing, not distancing. Now let's move into something even more rare. Green eyes. If you have green eyes, there is a high chance you've felt this your entire life. You don't fully fit anywhere. Not completely here, not completely there. Too intense for some people, too different for others, too grounded for the spiritual, too intuitive for the practical. And that can feel confusing, like you don't belong to a clear category. But here's the truth. You were never meant to. Through a Jungian lens, this aligns with the archetype of the catalyst, the one who initiates change, the one who disrupts patterns, the one who appears at the exact moment transformation is needed. You don't just exist in environments, you alter them, you enter people's lives, and things begin to shift. Sometimes quickly, sometimes deeply, sometimes uncomfortably. You ask questions others avoid. You introduce ideas that challenge old beliefs. You create movement where there was stagnation. And often, you don't even realize you're doing it, but others feel it. They feel change around you. If this resonates, type change in the comments, because this is not something small. This is your pattern. But here's the part that can be difficult, because transformation is not always comfortable. People are drawn to you intensely. They connect quickly. They grow. They shift. But then, sometimes they leave. Not because you did something wrong, but because the process you triggered needs space to integrate. And that can create a painful pattern. Connections that feel deep, but don't always last. Moments that feel meaningful, but don't always stabilize. And you may begin to wonder, why does this keep happening? Why do people come close and then disappear? But here's a different way to see it. You are not here to create comfort. You are here to create transformation. And transformation is rarely stable. It moves, it changes, it disrupts. And that includes your relationships. Your presence acts like a catalyst. And catalysts don't hold things in place. They accelerate change. That's why you often exist in what psychologists call a liminal space, a threshold, between phases, between identities, between versions of life. You are the bridge between what was and what is becoming. Ancient traditions recognize this. Some saw green eyes as symbols of transformation, of renewal, of rebirth, of crossing between worlds. And psychologically, this shows up as adaptability, creativity, the ability to navigate change. You often excel in environments that involve growth, transition, or evolution, coaching, therapy, creative work, consulting, any space where people or systems are shifting. Because you understand movement. You don't resist it, you work with it. But your growth comes from learning stability within change, not stopping your catalytic nature, but grounding it, so you don't feel like you're constantly losing connection, so you don't feel like you're always in transition. Because your power is not just in initiating change, it's in sustaining meaning within it. Now take a breath, because what you're starting to see is a pattern. Different expressions, different archetypes, different ways of moving through the world. And in the final part, we're going to bring all of this together so you can understand what this really means for your life. Not as theory, but as direction. So make sure you're subscribed, because the last part is where everything connects. There is something you need to understand now. Everything you've heard so far is not just description, it's direction. Because most people make one critical mistake when they encounter this kind of knowledge. They treat it like entertainment, like a personality test, like something interesting, but optional. And that is exactly why nothing changes. Because this is not about labeling yourself. It's about recognizing the pattern you are already living, consciously or not. Now let's go deeper into the next archetype, Hazel eyes. If you have hazel eyes, you've probably heard this your entire life. They change color. Sometimes they look green, sometimes brown, sometimes something in between, and you may have thought that was just a physical detail. But symbolically, it points to something much deeper. Through a Jungian lens, this aligns with what we can call the shapeshifter, the one who adapts, the one who reflects, the one who moves between worlds. You are not fixed, you are fluid. And that is not confusion, that is capacity. You have a rare ability to shift your energy depending on the situation, to meet people where they are, to become what the moment requires. With one person, you are grounded. With another, playful. With another, analytical. With another, protective. And often, you don't even think about it. It just happens. If this resonates, type mirror in the comments. Because this is one of your most powerful traits. You don't just interact with people. You reflect them. You show them parts of themselves they don't always see. You amplify their strengths. You expose their blind spots. You reveal their potential. And that's why people often feel deeply seen around you. But here's the shadow. Because this kind of adaptability has a cost. If you are always adjusting, always reflecting, always becoming what others need, you can start to lose track of who you are. You may feel like you don't have a fixed identity, like you are many versions of yourself, but none of them fully yours. And over time, that creates a quiet confusion, a subtle emptiness, because you're present everywhere, but not always centered within yourself. This is your lesson, not to stop adapting, but to anchor yourself, to know who you are, even while you shift, to stay connected to your core, even while you meet others where they are. Because your role is not to disappear into others, it's to reflect them, without losing yourself. And when you find that balance, you become something incredibly rare, a conscious mirror, someone who helps others see clearly, while remaining deeply rooted in their own identity. Now take a moment, because what you've just seen across all these archetypes is a system, different patterns, different roles, different ways of moving through life. Brown grounds, blue reveals, green transforms, hazel reflects. None of them are better. None of them are superior. They are functions, expressions, ways the psyche organizes itself. But here is the most important part of everything we've explored. Your eye color does not define you. It points you. It suggests where your natural energy flows, what feels easier, what feels more you, and what creates resistance when ignored. Because the real problem is not that people don't have direction, it's that they ignore it. They override their instincts. They silence their natural tendencies. They try to become something that doesn't match their internal structure. And then, they feel lost, disconnected, exhausted. So let me ask you something directly. Where in your life are you going against your own pattern? Where are you forcing yourself into something that doesn't feel natural? Where are you ignoring what keeps repeating inside you? Because those repetitions are not accidents. They are signals, and the more you ignore them, the louder they become, until eventually they turn into frustration, burnout, confusion. But the moment you start paying attention, something shifts. Things don't necessarily become easier, but they become clearer, more aligned, more yours, and that changes everything. Now here's what I want you to do. Go back to your eye color. Think about what you just heard, and ask yourself one simple question. What part of this have I been living without realizing it? Because awareness always comes before change, and if something in this felt true, even slightly, then you're already starting to see yourself differently, and that's where this journey really begins. If this opened something in you, make sure you subscribe, because the next step is not just understanding your pattern, it's learning how to actually live in alignment with it. And that is where everything transforms.